you a heads up, we will be starting in 1 minute.
Oh, I do it right here, watch it. I'm pointing at it. Yeah, I'm surprised. It was cool when I had it.
Okay, so
Yeah. And I just shared that this is new to us. It's not, I don't know much about it, but I'm keeping it off of the battery pack. So you save the battery because these wireless mics really do need to have batteries fast. So I went to get you extra batteries so as you know. Right here. So like right here. So I have extra batteries. So I will grab a pack for you guys.
So to use this, we need to turn that on, please.
So yeah, all you're gonna just turn it on here.
Okay, just a flip. Okay.
And here's my suggestion I just showed the gentleman there was, you hold it on and turn it on. It's on, and you let go. When you're not using it, so this is like it's full to me, the battery.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, but if you're not using it, if you just hold it in, it'll go off, and it just saves the battery.
Okay.
It's the same with that one.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so my idea is that if you're bored, if you guys want to use the panelists want to use that, because it does sound pretty good.
Okay.
Just use it, and then you can later that can become your microphone there, and then maybe then you can just pass this. This has a little cable, and then this has a little cable, so you can pass this microphone
If this
back and
becomes a
forth,
problem.
and that could be outside
Okay.
instead of running back.
Got it.
Welcome everyone. If you can hear me, say yes, please. Thank you. My name is Aida Negron. I work for an organization in the San Mateo County called the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center, PCRC. We have been around for 30 years, 30 or more, helping people with communication, conflict, transformation, and other issues. Anyone here familiar with PCRC? Anyone? Thank you. So, welcome to the Unhoused in Pacifica Task Force Community Forum. Tonight we have an agenda we are going to describe, but first of all I want to talk a little bit about the goal for this forum tonight. The goal that we have tonight is to share important information about the unhoused population in the city of Pacifica and gather input from residents. That's our mission for tonight. And I am sure that we are going to accomplish this mission together. Our agenda, as I mentioned, we are in the welcoming part. We are going to talk about group agreements, very important. We are going to have a presentation by a distinguished panel here. And then during the presentations, you guys will have some index cards at your tables. If you don't, please let us know, raise your hands, and you are going to be writing down your questions on those index cards. And we will be collecting them for the panelists. Yes, thank you. We will have 15 minutes to answer those questions from the index cards. We will do our best to answer all the questions. Then we will have small group discussions at each table. You have 3 questions that you guys are going to discuss with your facilitator. So facilitators, please stand up so we can see you. Please, facilitators for tonight, thank you so much. So they are going to be guiding the questions. They're not taking sides on any ideas. They are just guiding the process of getting information from everybody, making sure that all of you can participate. The restrooms are right here to the left. We have some snacks for you guys, so please Take care of yourselves with the snacks at any time. And I hope that you guys have some time to introduce yourselves. And you notice there's a camera here. So the camera will be broadcasting. They are going to be broadcasting, but they are going to be showing just the panel. And hopefully not myself. So don't worry about that. Any questions about the agenda tonight? Okay, so now we would like to know who's in the room. So who lives here in Pacifica? Who works here in Pacifica? Who lives and works in Pacifica? Lives and works, okay. Who is living here for less than 5 years? Been living here for less than 5. 5 to 10 years. 10 to 15 years. 15 to 20 years. More than 20 years. Whoa. There you go. You have a good idea of who's in the room tonight. Thank you for being here with us. So, so now we will have our panel. First of all, we have Suzanne Moore. She's a member of the task force, and she will be presenting the other panelists and the topics. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Ida. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. My name is Suzanne Moore, and I'm a member of the Unhoused and Pacifica Task Force. I want to welcome you to this forum tonight. Louder? Aha, thank you, everybody. And I want to thank a few folks who have been part of creating tonight's event. I want to acknowledge others on the task force, some of whom are in the room this evening. And I want to give a thank you to both the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center and the Silicon Valley Foundation. Donations from the foundation allowed us to invite Ida Negron to join us this evening. Also, a thank you to Mazzetti's and Starbucks for the dessert and coffee tonight. A big thank you to Jim Lang and Max Marsh from the community center here. We are deep in your debt for your efforts to set up this meeting space. And lastly, I want to thank the Pacifica Resource Center in our city for their support and interest in this community issue. I want to take a few moments to review the history of the task force. At City Council on February 11th of this year, the Council first entertained the idea of a community task group to better research the vehicularly housed here in Pacifica. As a result, Kevin Woodhouse, Pacific City Manager, who I thought I saw this evening, and Anita Reese, Director of the Pacifica Resource Center, put out invitations seeking stakeholders, and they selected 11 members. The task force is a diverse group, and our initial meetings were August 7th through the 21st, a 3-week period, and they were facilitated by Melissa Kuhn, Communications and Development Manager with the Institute for Local Government. And since then, the task force has rotated the role of meeting chair and note taker. The task force is a community group, and I want to describe our resources and purpose statement. As a community group, we have been given direction from our city manager, the Resource Center Director, and Chief of Police. We devised a purpose statement with their input, and that statement is the following: to work collaboratively and respectfully together with fellow task force members in researching and evaluating the complexity and social impact of homelessness issues in Pacifica, focusing on the vehicularly housed in order to identify feasible programs that can assist the vehicularly housed, improve the environment, prevent illegal habitation in vehicles in public streets in a financially and operationally sustainable manner. We have been independent of resources. We created our blog and email, workspace, and funding for this forum from scratch. Early in the process, we entertained the idea of opening our meetings for community observation, and some of us were initially in favor. We chose, however, to keep our work more focused within our diverse team. This allowed all members the chance to voice varied opinions and encourage the development of respect necessary for a productive working team. This evening, we return to the community to share what we have learned, respond to concerns you have identified, and further elicit your input. I want to introduce tonight's panelists. Anita Reese, Director of the Pacifica Resource Center, will be addressing the recent survey results, funding options for homeless services, and mobile waste management follow-up. Marina Hernandez, Case Manager from Pacifica Resource Center, and Yasmin Mora, Life Moves Homeless Outreach Team Case Manager, will discuss homeless case management, especially as it pertains to a pathway to stable housing. Some panelists were unable to come this evening, but handouts are available in the back at the information table, so please pick them up before you leave. Those unable to attend were senior staff from Life Moves, Pacifica Chief of Police Steidel, and Redwood City's police liaison to the homeless. So I'm going to ask Anita to share her information.
With your permission, Susan and Anita, I would like to emphasize the group agreements for tonight, which I mentioned before. First of all, we want you to speak when discussing with the other people at your table. Speak from your own experience. We know that you know about experiences about a lot of people, but we will appreciate if you talk about your own experience with whatever the topic it is. Please listen to understand each other. We are going to be in a listening mode when the panelists present, and then don't forget to write your questions on the index cards. We are going to respect our differences. We agree to disagree, and be curious about what is presented tonight. Also share the air. I know that a lot of people are very passionate about topics, but make sure that your people at your table, others have the opportunity to participate as well. And your questions are very valuable. All questions are welcome. Either we have the time to discuss them or not. We will be following up if not, but all questions and ideas are welcome. Thank you so much.
Good evening, all. My name, again, is Anita Reese, and I'm the Executive Director with the Pacifica Resource Center. So you have the handouts, or the handouts were at the front desk, and you could pick those up to follow along, but I've got it up here as well. So just a little bit about PRC, for those of you who don't know who we are. We've been around for 45 years, and we provide economic security services to Pacifica families and individuals by providing a safety net of food, housing assistance, and other critical services. And our goal overall is to assure that the basic needs of every Pacifican are met so that they have the opportunity to thrive. So I thought that I would give you an idea of what homeless means. So there are 4 categories of homelessness. Literally, homeless is really what we're talking about tonight. Those are folks who are living in a place not meant for habitation. There's the imminent risk of homelessness, which means within 14 days they will become homeless. They are counted as homeless as well. These are folks who've maybe gotten a 3-day notice or in the eviction process or have been asked by a family member to leave. Those are all, that is considered homeless as well. And then the 3rd category doesn't really pertain to us. And then fleeing domestic violence is the 4th category. So based on the one-day homeless counts in Pacifica, these are the numbers over time. So you can see in 2007, we had 7, and 2019 we have 116. You can see that over time it's gone up and down, and it's generally, I can speak from PRC's perspective, we do see about 100 folks every year. Not necessarily these 100 folks, but we do see about 100 folks every year who are experiencing homelessness and need additional support. So this is a breakdown of where folks were seen during the one-day homeless count. Again, this is all in your packet so you can see a little closer and you can review it later. But in 2017, you can see that there were 21 on the street, 45 in cars, 28 in motorhomes, and 18 in encampments. Compared to 2019, there were 4 on the street, 18 in cars, 72 in motorhomes, and 2 in encampments. I will note that the 72 includes Picardo Ranch, because there were several RVs and motorhomes on that property, and those were included. Those have since no longer there. So that was about 20, I believe. So in terms of PRC, these are the services that we provide already. These are the things that we offer to folks who are homeless or unhoused in Pacifica: groceries, shower program, homeless supplies, inclement weather referrals, housing assistance, and other critical services. This is also, PRC is also the entry point to getting homeless services at the countywide level, entering into shelter, any other housing assistance programs. So we participated in a motorhome study or survey with the county of San Mateo, and this happened it was mid-September through mid-October, so a 4-week period. We went out at different times throughout the week, evening hours, morning hours, after Saturday hours. And based on the surveys that we collected 22 motorhome surveys. In those motorhomes, there were 32 adults and 1 child. And you can see the age range anywhere from under 18 all the way to over 70, and primarily folks were 40 to 54 and 55 to 69. Gender, primarily male, some 30% female, and then trans male. In terms of ethnicity, primarily white, secondary is Hispanic, Asian, Hawaiian, very few in other ethnic groups. In terms of location of prior residence, this is where we talked about, where did you live before you became unhoused in your motorhome. 41% were from Pacifica, 41% were from out of the county, and then 18% were from some other place within San Mateo County. And then the reason for living in their motorhome, it was primarily the high cost of housing, and then family conflict issues. Several folks were living with family, and then they became unhoused and were able to get a motorhome to live in. In terms of income, they did all have income. Not all of them had income, but primarily their income came from employment. And you can see the average income that folks earned in the motorhomes was $2,700 a month. This is residency by household, is really where or how often they stayed in their motorhome. So 76% of the folks that we surveyed were living in their motorhome every night. 14% stayed occasionally with family or friend, and then 10% had another place to live outside of, I think it was, the way that it was framed was if they had another home to live in outside of Pacifica. And then in terms of the length of stay, you can see that most, 50% of the folks that we surveyed were more than 12 months. The highest number, the longest length in the motorhomes was 4 years, and the shortest was a couple of weeks. In terms of their housing plan, most folks, 63%, saw their motorhome as a temporary situation. Their goal was to get permanent housing. And then there were 14%, 3 folks who were looking for an RV park. Their goal was to continue to live in a motorhome and wanted to live in an RV park. Another 14% saw their motorhome as a permanent place to live. These were folks, generally what that meant was they weren't looking for an RV park. They were interested in the lifestyle of living in their motorhome and moving around. And then 2 folks didn't answer. All of the questions were optional. So this is just to give you a sense of what already exists in terms of support services for folks who are unhoused. This is not just for folks who are in motorhomes, but also for folks who are unhoused in general. So the homeless outreach team, you'll hear from Yasmin briefly in a few minutes. Street medicine, this is an opportunity for folks to get medical assistance if they're unhoused. There's a homeless engagement and linkages. This is mental health specific and helping people become connected to behavioral health and health services, and with the ultimate, again, goal of getting housed. The core service agencies, that's what PRC is. We're the core agency that serves Pacifica. And then shelters, which also have case managers who are working with folks to become housed. So all of these services, the goal is ultimately to help folks become housed. So in terms of new services, one is rapid rehousing for folks who are living in vehicles. So folks who might want to continue to stay in their motorhome could potentially get support to move into an RV park or move into brick and mortar housing. Whatever their goal is, this rapid rehousing would actually be able to provide some support to help them become housed. And then expanded outreach on the coast. Pacifica Resource Center has gotten or is working on finalizing a contract with the county that would allow us to reach out to folks who are unhoused. We will be spending quite a bit of time with folks who are in their vehicles or in motorhomes, trying to connect them to services and ultimately connecting them to housing-centered case management, really working with folks on what their obstacles are to becoming housed, where they were most successful housed, and then working towards helping them become housed again. As part of this work, we are planning to pilot a motorhome or mobile dump site. One of the things that we need is a location to have the truck come, and then folks who are in motorhomes would be able to come and dump, addressing the issues and concerns around health and safety. So it's something that is new, something that we're trying for two reasons. One is that it addresses the concerns in the community about folks illegally dumping or not knowing where they're dumping. And the second is it's an opportunity for us to connect to people who don't necessarily think that they're homeless. We're offering a service that they need, one that they want, and one that we can then use to develop relationships with folks and try to get them connected to services and then ultimately, as I said, housed. So in terms of potential funding sources, one of the sources, the funding for the contract that I just mentioned came from the state to the county to Pacifica Resource Center. Part of the reason we were eligible is because the city decided, what was it called? It's a shelter emergency. So they determined a shelter emergency, which allowed us to have access to those resources. So similar to that program, which was HEAP, there's a new one coming out that was signed into law July of 2019 by Governor Newsom. It's the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. And the county expects to have an RFP out in spring of 2020, and the hope is that then the programs will be funded by April of 2020, and we need to spend those funds by June of 2025. Now, we don't know exactly what will be possible under that RFP, but I can say through the HEAP program, one of the things that was possible was funding for new shelter programs. And while we're not necessarily talking about a new shelter program, like creating a shelter on site in Pacifica or on the coast, one of the things that could be used is to develop something like that, or even to create a safe parking program or a rotating shelter, or any of those things. But again, we don't know what that RFP is going to look like. We just know that there will be funding for homeless services that we could potentially tap into. The other is County of San Mateo. They do have Measure K funds. It was a 1/2-cent tax to support essential county services. Which already funds many housing and homeless services, including the core agencies and homeless outreach teams, all of those things. That's another potential funding source, especially as we're developing programs. And then last is the foundations. I will say that I had a conversation with folks from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative who are exploring addressing homelessness at a regional level, focusing on the impact of homelessness on youth. And so they're just in the exploratory phases, but again, we're poised to potentially access some of those resources if we come up with solutions that are innovative and new. I think that we have a great opportunity in Pacifica, particularly because of the way that Pacifica is situated, that we could actually implement something, see how it works, and then we can show that what works and what doesn't work in Pacifica and use it in other areas. But to do that, it does require community support, which is what we're hoping to gain through the Unhoused and Pacifica Task Force and all of you here. Whatever the decision and whatever the solutions that come up, those are all things that we can explore, and these are potential resources for those things. So for more information, you can contact me. I'm happy to talk to anybody about any of these issues further. And then Marina Hernandez, who you'll be hearing from momentarily, is our direct services manager, who's also available to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Remember to write down your questions in using your index cards. And now we have Marina's presentation.
Thank you. My name is Marina Hernandez. I've been at the agency for 24 years. My title is Direct Services Manager, and I'm also the lead case manager. My job is to coordinate with individuals and establish a case plan with meeting everybody where they are and creating a case plan moving towards permanent housing. Okay, I would like to share one of the stories that I have from a client, Pacifica resident. They went from being housed to being homeless and to an RV, moving to permanent housing again. So my client, our client, the Pacifica Resource Center client, our neighbor, grew up in Pacifica. He became a single parent of a daughter after a divorce. He went from being housed to couch surf to being with family or friends, and then that, it didn't work anymore. So he was able to get an RV, was in an RV for a decade. While he was there, he was working. He was working for the union. He had a daughter that was in school in Pacifica. She graduated from Terranova High School. After a mental breakdown, he was unable to work. A proud man who didn't want to access services at the agency because it was too hard to ask for services. A man who has never asked for services in his life, he finally came to us. He came to us in 2004, and after working with us, we developed a case plan focusing on housing. Housing did not become available until years later. He went from being on the street, parked on the street for more than 10 years, and community complaints finally moved him into an RV with the Pacifica Resource Center support. So our focus has always been housing. So we were able to help this individual and his daughter to move into an RV park. Pacifica Resource Center was able to use some funding to pay for a few months in this RV. Because of the cost, the high cost of the rent, he was unable to stay there any longer while he was waiting for a voucher for permanent housing. So from there, he went into a parking lot at a church. He was there for another few months until his housing voucher became available. Client started receiving mental health services. Daughter finally graduated from high school. He was able to get his voucher and housed in 2018. Recently, I checked in with client. This client moved actually out of Pacifica, even though it was really hard because this is his community. He grew up here. This was our neighbor as well as his daughter. He moved out of Pacifica to Redwood City and with a voucher. Now his rent is no more than 30% of his income, and he received case management for life. His daughter graduated from Terranova, like I say, and I checked with him this past February, and he told me that he was very happy. He's still housed, he gets mental health, and he's able to be indoors. And so, as you can see, the case management start when they walk into our doors, but it takes time for him. It takes time for him to be housed again. His focus was not to live on the streets. His focus was not live in an RV all his life. And our purpose for providing case management was to house him again. And I just want to share something very personal, that one of the reasons that I do this job is because I've been homeless twice in my life. One, when I was 7 years old, I was blessed enough to have family and friends who let us stay in their home for a period of time after my mom, running from domestic violence, was able to find us permanent housing. The second time was as a 19-year-old single mother that stayed in an RV in the back of the house of a really nice lady. I pay rent. I was there for a year. As soon as my daughter was born, I was able to become housed again. I had never shared this story, but I think it's worth for you to hear and to see the face of a homeless individual that overcome that situation and became housed again. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marina, for sharing that story. Good evening, everyone. I'm Yasmin Mora. I'm an outreach case manager. My region is Pacifica and Half Moon Bay, Daly City, and Broadmoor. So I'm just going to be explaining to you guys what services we offer as the Homeless Outreach Team service. So we basically work with individuals who are chronically homeless, living in the streets and RVs. Our main goal is to get them stable housing and for them to gain self-sufficiency. So some of the services that our team offers, I'm going to be explaining each different of our team that they do. So when I encounter an individual, our main focus is to get them assessed with for them to be connected with a waiting list for housing. Also, if they're interested in shelter, we also help with that. And if the individual can't go to a shelter, we offer transportation, bus tokens, or Lyft rides. So I'll be explaining the other team that focus is HCH. They are mainly focused on offering them service for like Social Security, and if they need getting connected with that. Also, if the client needs a dental van referral or a vision, they'll help with that as well. Like Anita was saying, also street medicine comes out. So if a client has a medical need, street medicine will come and meet with the client and meet that need. Nurse practitioner will come out, and also a psychiatrist if they need to talk to one. If the client has once they're using substance abuse, we will connect them with an inpatient or outpatient service. That depends on the client, of course. If they want to be connected with a mental health provider, that's we also connect them with that, with a therapist, and eventually get them into a clinic. So basically that's what we do, and yeah, feel free to any questions that you have, feel free to ask.
It's their decision if they want to see a psychiatrist, or if they're using drugs, you can just, if they don't want to talk to someone, you just put them right back.
So, can I start answering? No.
Yes, but please, she's going to answer the question, but remember that we have other people who ask questions, and we have the cards here. But yeah, she will answer your question.
I will.
Can you?
Oh, can I answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So no, we do not make the clients do that. That's their decision at the end. So we just have a list of, hey, these are the services we offer. If you're open to it, you know, at the first time, sometimes the clients are not gonna tell me the whole story. That's when you start building rapport with them. So eventually the client will be like, hey, you know, I do need help getting connected with a mental health provider or with a inpatient or outpatient services, or, you know, basically we just, sometimes clients just want to talk, you know, and be heard. So that's, I mean, I do this because I have a heart. So if you know, eventually they'll start trusting you, and hopefully we'll get to that housing, which that's the main focus. But sometimes they don't want housing at first. Sometimes they just want to focus on another area. So does that answer your question?
The first part answered the question. I don't agree with the process, but I think the law enforcement should be notified, or it at least should be tracked as part of your statistics.
Well, thank you for your question. We are ready to answer questions that we have on the index cards. Are you ready to start, Susan? Or Anita, or any of the panelists?
So the first question that was asked of the task force is, have any city lots been identified for safe parking? And we are working on that list. And if you have ideas, put them down on your paper for us to see if it's something that we may have overlooked. In the back of the room is a handout on models of safe parking, and we know that other programs have utilized a variety of options, from city lots to faith-based lots. There have been some school-based parking that has been piloted, so there's a lot of different possibilities out there.
So one of the questions was, who conducted the survey that is referenced on the slides? So the survey was actually a county-wide survey, and Pacifica Resource Center served as a captain of the coast side, which ran from Pacifica through Half Moon Bay, and that's where we organized folks to go out and do the survey. So it was a county-sponsored survey, and the data that I provided was just the Pacifica information. I figured you all didn't necessarily want to know about the other areas, but I believe there was a handout that described the full county information as well.
Do you have any questions?
Where are the majority of the unhoused working? In Pacifica or outside Pacifica? There is not much work in Pacifica, so most of our individuals do work outside. But there is a percentage that work in town. And the second question was about what percentage of people who come to the PRC and need housing end up getting it. So we go through a very thorough assessment process. So most of the people who are qualified for our services, they will get the assistance. We have 3 different grants, and we also coordinate with San Vicente de Paul and Pacifica. So our focus is to provide that services to anybody that need it. But they do have to meet some requirements for that. And our, again, case management focus for individuals is to get them housed. So that's our main focus. So we coordinate with other agencies, with HUD, with different partner agencies to make sure that the individual get housed. Most of the times our unhoused individuals, they will end up living outside of Pacifica. Or if there is someone that is coming through Pacifica and they need to get back home, we also have funding available, and we have sent people back home, because this is not a place for them. And I just want to mention something. There is a lot of misinformation about people who are not in Pacifica. Most of those individuals who are not Pacifica residents, most of the times they will not stay in Pacifica, and we can help them with a bus pass, to pay transportation to go back home. So again, most of our unhoused individuals, whether if they're in RV or outdoors, they are Pacifica residents.
Thank you, Marina. You have 3 more. Are you ready? Thank you.
Okay, so I have several other questions. So a couple of questions were around proposed location of an RV dump site. That's open. We need a location, right? So the idea, the way that we have envisioned that mobile dump site is that a truck would show up once a week, once every other week for several hours, and then folks who have motorhomes will come to that site and then dump. So we do need a location for that. We don't have a space at PRC. There was a potential, I mean, there's lots of potential sites. We need, basically we just need a parking lot, or the waste treatment plant could be a potential site. I mean, there's lots of potential opportunities. We just need to have that location offered. So we don't have a site yet. We're looking for it. One question, what percentage of the RV population you interviewed were drug users? That wasn't a question. We asked, one of the questions that was asked is, do you know where to get those services? Do some of these things, do drug and alcohol use affect your ability to become housed? Because folks self-identify, we can't confirm that any of that information was 100% shared, right? These are oftentimes people that we had met for the very first time. They didn't know us. We did say that the reason we were doing the surveys was to gain information so that we could potentially create programs that could address the concerns and the issues that made it difficult for them to be housed. So I'd have to look at that information again to let you know for sure, and I do have that data, so I'll look at that. So if housing is impossible, can you help the homeless insulate their vehicles, i.e. convert vehicles into a camper? Those are things that are potentially possible, but our goal ultimately is to help people become housed. We definitely want people to be safe. There is some potential resources to help get people's vehicles movable, drivable, potentially up to code to get into an RV park. All of those things are things that we could potentially use funding to help get to that point. But in terms of actually converting a vehicle into a camper, it really sort of depends on the circumstances and what resources we have available. What happened in the mobile home park on the beach in Manor that caused mobile homes to be kicked out? Is that facility full? There's a couple things that happened there. It became under new management, and so things shifted. They implemented things like the motorhome has to be a certain age, it has to be drivable, like all of these things that then impacted the ability for some of the folks who were in the motorhome park. They couldn't stay, so they were asked to leave. And they are often full, and there often is a wait list to get people into that motorhome, the RV park. It says, what percentage of the unhoused fit the case you provided? Are others just in RVs to save money? I could only speak to the information that we were provided. There were a few folks who did say that they just couldn't afford the cost of rent, and for that reason they were in an RV or in a motorhome. In terms of how they afforded RVs, you know, some of the things that we heard from folks is that they saved up money to buy it. Some were gifted to them. If you've noticed, many of the RVs that are, or motorhomes that are on the street are not new RVs. They're older RVs. They were able to purchase them for much lower amounts than you would have expected. And unfortunately, because they are older, they aren't eligible to be in the current RV park, right? Doesn't mean that there may be others that might, but most of them are pushing folks out. They have to be within 10 years, right? And a lot of the RVs that we've seen on the streets are not that, are much older. When they move, I can't read that one. So whoever asked that question, you can come see me afterwards. I'll try to answer it. Based on what Anita said, is a shelter off the table for Pacifica? If not, what is the city doing with the old treatment plant? So I can only speak to the fact that several years ago we did try to purchase or tried to work with the county to potentially create a shelter on the coast. It didn't necessarily have to be in Pacifica, but the idea was somewhere along the coast we wanted to have a shelter. So we looked into the possibility of buying a large house to convert it into a single shelter. We also looked at the possibility of purchasing an apartment building, not we, PRC, but the county with others. And at that time, what was shared with folks was that there wasn't really funding for brick and mortar shelter, that the focus on federal funding is housing first. So the idea is time in shelter is to be limited because it's much harder to become housed the longer you've been in shelter. So the longer you've been homeless, the harder it is to become housed. So the idea is once someone becomes homeless, let's try to get them housed immediately or as quickly as possible. So there wasn't a lot of funding, and there isn't a lot of funding for brick and mortar shelters, which is why the county started looking at the possibility of a rotating shelter on the coast specifically, so it would avoid the need to build something. And we would use, and this is what's worked in other areas, churches and other faith-based communities, buildings, and they would rotate from those buildings. So the county conducted a feasibility study. From that feasibility study, we came up with ideal programs that would be associated with it. And then from that, we've used that model and kind of adapted it to a safe parking program as well, which we've tested locally in Pacifica and plan to test again this winter. The idea to test it is really to see, just to show folks how it is possible to do, with the hope again of getting community support to actually commit to weeks on end or potentially a month over the course of the winter so that folks can get housed. And again, they'd be sheltered during the winter, but the goal would be to get them housed. And then in terms of the old treatment plant, I can't speak to that. You'd have to ask the city about that. But I will say that conversations are starting a little again around the possibility of developing a shelter on the coast somewhere, because that might be a longer term solution that we might explore. So what are other cities doing? East Palo Alto has implemented a safe parking program. It's relatively new. I think another question was what outcomes. There aren't really any outcomes to share other than the fact that folks, I mean, this is a huge outcome. Folks have a safe place to sleep at night. They feel like they are able to address more of their issues because they aren't worried about being asked to leave. They know that their property is safe. They know that they're safe. Those are huge accomplishments. Those are huge outcomes. In terms of how many have become housed, it is only a few months old, so there aren't enough outcomes to share at this time. And then a question about, did the program attract more people into the city for the program support? Generally, each of these programs are associated with our other homeless services, which require folks to be assessed and then selected for those programs. They have to abide by certain guidelines and rules in order to be part of it. So in terms of attracting more folks, that's not really what ends up happening, because folks who are not eligible aren't able to get into the program, so they aren't necessarily coming for more services because there is a structure for each of these programs. Where does all this funding come from? That was the information that I provided. Some of it's coming from the state, some of it coming from the county, some of it's coming from foundations and individual donors. The reality is that homelessness is a huge issue. Folks that are in motorhomes is a huge issue, not just for Pacifica, but for across the Bay Area as well as the country. And because of that, folks are looking at regional solutions. And again, I will say that we have this great opportunity to use that interest and use the location that Pacifica is, and the fact that our homeless is not so exorbitant. We could actually address homelessness in Pacifica in a way that other cities can't, because they're here, they're our residents. And so I would encourage us to use this opportunity to really come to some agreements around what could be possible, because again, we can't do any of these things if there's not community support. We've been working on a rotating shelter for probably the last 3 to 5 years, and as much as the churches want to support, they are unable to support at the level that we need. But, right, if the city is able to give a location for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that sends a message to the churches that it's something that is supported in this community. And if it's supported in this community, then we can create something like that. But until we have community support, we will not be able to address homelessness. If we continue to have to, I can't attract a service provider if there isn't community support. So no one is going to come here to offer a rotating shelter or a shelter option or a safe parking program if there isn't community support. And that's where we see, that's what I see Pacifica Resource Center's role. It's not to implement a safe parking program or implement a shelter. It is to help a service provider get community support so we can actually implement these resources. So again, I just encourage you all to think creatively about what we can do here, because we do have this great opportunity.
Thank you, Anita. We do have more questions, but we will let you know in the next steps part what we are doing with the other questions, because we need to move forward with other topics. But before that, she wants your name again? Marina wants to give you a message about the questions she has.
I have a lot of cards of questions regarding our work with the Unhoused community. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. I'm sorry that I won't be able to answer. I'm gonna be around, but you can also call me at the agency. I'm right there on Palmetto, 738-7470. My extension is 2, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about our case management, our case plans, how long. So one of the questions is about how long someone has to be a resident to provide services. So I'll be happy to answer all those questions if you call me directly at the agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Suzanne?
There was a question about who, if the task force members were all here this evening. They're all here, they're facilitating at the table. And there's only one person that wasn't able to make it this evening because of an ill child.
Thank you so much. So moving forward, now it's your turn to discuss with your group at your tables the questions that you have. This being form is if you have additional comments or questions, you can use that form and leave it here, or you can take it home, and we will tell you later what to do with it, where you can drop it off. We will have half an hour for this part. We have 10 minutes for each of the questions. So we and the facilitators will guide the conversation, and we will be going around if you guys have any other questions. Thank you so much. The last that I gave discussed with Suzanne, and when she announces the next step, you can say, we are going to take this question, we're going to publish the answers in the blog. And direct people to the exact address